it's always hard to make sense of these things, but it felt like the whole reason for that anecdote was to say that there were Democrats who were trashing Harris, and that I guess fell through pretty quickly. And then it just became a question of like, did this ever happen at all?
Called Maggie Haberman apparently, and she said that he was ranting at her in like a little childish voice, like "You're wrong, I'm right," which is a very sign that somebody's a mature and stable candidate for president. But anyway. All right, we are back with Chris Cadelago, California bureau chief for Politico, based out of Sacramento. I used to see him out there when I was in Oaktown, and maybe the best guy on the Kamala Harris beat, probably the best guy. Chris, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you? Thank you for that. Yeah, we miss you in the Bay. Yeah,
I know. It was a chapter of my life. It was one I reflect on fondly, but I don't know. Life's pretty good in New Orleans. Let me ask you. So there's two stories I want to talk about. The first one is this crazy Donald Trump story. It was the one where he rolled out the idea that his insurrection was better than the Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. But he like made one aside comment about how he was in a helicopter with former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown, and how he was down talking Kamala, and the helicopter had a crash landing. And that flew by me. I was like, that sounds weird, but there are other weird stuff happening. Then a few hours later, I saw you on the beat going like, this did not happen. He was only ever in a helicopter with Jerry Brown, and the story ended up getting weirder from there. So give us the backstory. How did that perk your ears?
Yeah, I'll take some blame for the floating the Jerry thing. I guess I thought that was you throw it out there, a possibility. I had no idea when we were kind of just almost just throwing stuff at the wall that was going to like take on, that was going to be like the central piece of actual news stories, which kind of tells you something about where we're at right now. Brown's folks almost immediately were like, no, definitely didn't happen on our flight, which was in 2018 with Gavin Newsom, where they were in Marine One, basically, and then some other aircraft.
They were checking out the fires. That was the context of that one.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that people mentioned was this was paradise, and Trump kept referring to it as pleasure, which was really the only thing that Newsom and Brown remembered about that flight. The idea that some of these people, I mean, in private, let alone with Trump, would be trashing Kamala Harris it just kind of strains any kind of reality that you would see. And kind of same thing when I heard the Willie Brown part. It was like, Willie Brown says a lot of things about a lot of and can kind of riff with the best of them, but he's not someone who has a history of speaking ill of or disparaging Kamala Harris. So that part just didn't make sense either. The timelines didn't really add up. People found some clips about Willie Brown, who had been in a rough helicopter landing in LA, but there was no sign that Trump had anything to do with that. And then Trump just like doubled and tripled down on this. He was, said he would sue the news, said he would sue the Times for this. Basically said that this had been written about in books, which that doesn't make it true.
He called Maggie Haberman apparently, and she said that he was ranting at her in like a little childish voice, like "You're wrong, I'm right," which is a very sign that somebody's a mature and stable candidate for president. But anyway,
yeah, the idea that it's always hard to make sense of these things, but it felt like the whole reason for that anecdote was to say that there were Democrats who were trashing Harris, and that I guess fell through pretty quickly. And then it just became a question of like, did this ever happen at all? Like, did this have anything to do with anything? And a lot of people were calling Willie Brown. He was getting a lot of media, a lot of attention, which anyone who knows Willie Brown knows clearly is something he loves. And from that kind of came this idea of like, well, who else could it be? And there was a lot of kind of chatter on the ground about potentially somebody else. This man who we found out was on a hard landing with Trump, Nate Holden, who's a 95 years old now and was an elected official in LA with Mayor Bradley back then. So this is way back in the day. He was someone who got to know Trump kind of a classic elected official where Trump is trying to do a big project in their city and he's trying to show off and show them like, you got to come to the Taj, you got to come see some of this stuff I built. So he's trying to redevelop the Ambassador Hotel, which of course has its own incredible history. He had Holden out.
That's where RFK Sr. was killed.
Yeah, and there was basically these competing proposals back in the day. Should this be a school? Should this be several schools? Interestingly enough, there were some elected officials in LA at the time to kind of paint a picture here who wanted it to be a school because they opposed busing for desegregation out to other schools outside of kind of Koreatown, where this is, kind of downtown LA. And so Holden was very much behind this Trump project, this redevelopment. It was going to be, this will not shock you at all, one of, if not the tallest buildings in the world when it was being proposed. And so it was kind of a scramble. Had just kind of heard through the grapevine this name Holden come up as someone who possibly could have been on the helicopter with Trump. And then by chance, we found out in talking to Holden that he has these kind of regular calls. He's an older guy with Barbara Rez, who's an old Trump executive who's written books about Trump, obviously been critical of Trump in these later years. And she was able to confirm this. There's actually a passage in her book that she said, I think she said like the publisher wasn't even crazy about the passage because they were like, who really cares about this? But glad she put it in there because it allowed us to confirm that this hard landing did in fact happen. And even after the story came out, we had Trump spokespeople and folks who continued to send us these statements, send us these Truth Social posts where he's basically quadrupled down on the idea that he was in this helicopter with Willie Brown. He doesn't want to let it go.
So we've got the stubbornness there, but then there's the other side of it, which is it stubbornness and lying, or is it possible that Trump has just mixed up his black politicians from California because Nate Holden is also black?
It's definitely possible he mixed them up. This is a time where you got to remember when Trump is reaching out to elected officials, trying to kind of sweet talk folks about his projects. Willie Brown, I don't know if as early as 1990 he was really in the mix, but Willie Brown was someone that he like consulted, someone that he would reach out to as kind of a primary contact to say like, who do I need to hit up about this? Who are some of the local officials who I can meet with? And so there was, like, to his credit, and I know some folks probably don't want to hear this, there was some overlap in these worlds. It's not totally out of the question that Willie Brown would sort of surface, but that's not what he's doing here. He's insisting that this was Willie Brown on this helicopter with him. That just so far does not seem to be true.
Does Holden say that he was critical of Kamala Harris? I guess even like if it was, is it possible? Is that possible?
So a lot of
that's also so long ago. Like, what would Kamala Harris was that? That was before she was DA, right?
Kamala Harris would really not have been on many people's radars at all in 1990. I mean, she was like, I think, finishing law school and becoming kind of a frontline prosecutor in Alameda County at the time. And so this idea that anybody would be trashing her for any reason back then just doesn't make any sense.
All right. So to sum up, Trump is either hallucinating the story, mixing up his black people, or just like creating a pernicious lie because he wants to resurface the kind of Willie Brown Kamala Harris relationship accusation. So I guess an L either way you put it. I do want to, well, I got you. I wanted to have you on for that little enjoyable nugget. But while I got you, I've been wanting to kind of pick your brain about the Harris campaign. You had another story over the weekend about how there's a little bit of tension between some of the new people that have come in, mostly from Obama world, and the Biden people that were sticking around. I'm a little less interested in that because that's going to be a natural tension, and more interested in like whether there's any kind of red flags here about the vice president's management style. I mean, you wrote about the 2020 campaign, which had let me pull it up here because you had a pretty enjoyable phrase. Was the multi-headed structure Harris installed at the top of her 2020 campaign was a disaster, chaotic, creating choke points that nearly ground the operations to a halt. Decisions took forever to make. So that was brought in 2020. But even going back further, like she just had a lot of turnover with her team. And she doesn't maybe I'm wrong about this, but outside of her family, she doesn't like really have anybody that's been around since like the Senate days that she or since before the AG days or the original Senate campaign that she relies upon, right?
Yeah, part of this, I mean, I've made this comparison before, and I don't know that people have really thought about this before, but so in this time where Biden has picked her as his VP, she was going through kind of another turnover of staff. There were folks who were around her and had stuck closely by her, both from California in the Senate office, through the 2019 primary and then into the Veep stake. So there was like somewhat of a kind of core, at least a few people who were around.
Like
but
who would make up that core?
There was a few people who were close staffers. There's a woman named Ruhini, who's a top policy advisor, who stuck with her pretty closely kind of through that period. There weren't a lot of people during the Veep stakes, but she was certainly kind of a main person who had been in that Senate office. And the reason this is kind of critical is when they're doing things on the fly and they have to figure out like, okay, where was she on this thing? What had she said on this particular piece? You kind of need to be able to marshal that institutional memory and just like move really quickly. And so people have mentioned, as you know, probably better than a lot of people on campaigns, that's a key thing.
Yeah.
The reason I did bring up Trump is because for all his insecurities, like Mike Pence had a core group of advisors who were able to stay with him, who were close by. He even was able to have a super PAC open after getting picked as VP, which nobody really remembers because he didn't really do anything with that super PAC. But Kamala, on the other hand, was like her data, all of her stuff was just like thrown into the DNC. It was thrown into the Biden campaign. And so there was like less of a autonomy that she had. And she understood that. That was like something we wrote about early in the VP process, where she knew that like to win the Biden team's trust, she would need to kind of set aside clearly her own ambition in that moment and set aside these relationships that she had. Some of her advisors who ran the Senate race, who ran her 2019 campaign, did not move out to DC, did not work with her at that time. And so this has been kind of she's kind of needed to reinvent that inner circle aside from her own family with whether it be chiefs of staff. She had a first chief of staff who did not work out. And then she came and got Lorraine Voles, who was someone from the Gore era, Clinton Gore era, who knew Ron Klain, knew folks in the White House. And the thought behind that was to really kind of get these two offices in better sync. And that was something that she did. And just try to kind of settle the turnover among her staff. There's always going to be turnover in the White House in these high profile offices, no matter who it is. But she, like, because of this history, people were looking at it and saying, oh man, she can't keep the staff. She can't do these things. And fast forward to today, there is like a necessity besides her political chief of staff. I already mentioned Sheila Nix, and I already mentioned Lorraine Voles. And of course, she's brought in folks who a lot of these listeners probably know, like Brian Fallon, who's doing high-level comms for her. She has a few other people who have been around for a while. And then, of course, you go from an office. I mean, this is what people on the Biden campaign said, is you go from an office of 20, 25 people, including a handful of those who are close to her. And then you have to build out very, very quickly and bring in folks who she can rely on. And I think there's kind of some kitchen cabinet level advice she's getting from her brother-in-law, Tony West, from some others there. But this is kind of a necessity of, people talk about like building the plane while they're flying it. There's all these kind of analogies that they're using. But a lot of it traces back to this idea that she, unlike someone like Biden, who had this like core group of Biden folks who had been with him for decades, she needed to kind of bring new folks in. And so that's the process we're seeing like right now in real time.
Yeah, it's funny because there is two sides of that coin, right? Like it's balance in all things. We saw some of the downsides of Biden relying only on people that he's known for 40 years, and maybe we're a little less clear-eyed than they could have been, to say the least, about the political situation he was in. On the other side, though, you do. I guess it's just a little nagging worry that I have. I mean, there's the institutional knowledge side of things that you mentioned. I know on the Jeb campaign, for example, we had Sally Bradshaw around who'd been with him forever. But even still, I was like always trying to interview all the past comms people to try to like to just figure out like where was he on all this stuff. Like that stuff sometimes can put you behind the eight ball. But less than that is just kind of the reliable advisor side of it. Like that's the thing that I just think about. Like you gave a couple of those names. And Brian Fallon, who I've known for a while, who's a top level comms guy, really smart. And he joined her like 5 months ago, right? Like he's just been there for not long. And so it's like when push is coming to shove on tough questions, like who is she talking to? And it's kind of not really clear, right?
Yeah, I think this is, to get outside advice, to get this kind of unvarnished sense of where she's at. I mean, there are some names you could throw out from the past, some advisors. There's some crossover right now, folks helping out. And, there's others listeners might know who have given her advice in the past, political professionals, aside from all these folks they mentioned. There's like the Jim Margolises of the world, well-known ad guy. And of course, we mentioned some of these people coming in. Now, their titles might be associated with Jen Palmieri is second gentleman.
Yeah, Jen Palmieri is coming in, who I was with on the circus, like longtime good advisor with David Plouffe, Obama's campaign manager. Mitch Stewart
Stephanie
is a
Cutter.
long time cutter. So like all these people are great. But again, they came in a week ago. So there's just like a trust building period that I guess is maybe that maybe could lead to some issues. And I'm thrilled that she's bringing in A-list people, but I guess it's just something that's notable that there were not any of those kind of people around already.
Here's kind of the thing I heard, which is it potentially like a best case scenario is everybody, including her, and this is people you talk to who have known her for a long time, are very much dialed in and know what the challenge is. They're on a very, very tight timeline. There isn't necessarily, now this doesn't mean this won't happen at times, but there really isn't time for the kind of getting your sea legs, figuring things out, backbiting, and forth, infighting. Like they're just, and I think this is part of what Jen O'Malley Dillon, the campaign chair, who was obviously with Biden and before that had gotten brought into the Biden campaign when he was trying to win that primary. I think it was after Nevada. Her point on this was like each of these people have like a defined portfolio that they can fall back on. Like the worst thing you hear sometimes from folks on campaigns is this kind of roving senior advisor with no portfolio who's just going to pop in whenever they want and throw out some advice and then go talk to reporters on the side. And so that's very much like what they're trying to avoid. They don't want these folks, without portfolios wandering around, throwing in advice at her when she doesn't take it, going to their favorite reporter and saying, oh my God, I can't believe she, didn't listen to me on that thing. They are very much hoping that does not happen, that these people are all very much like plugged in, that they all understand the mission, that they get that this is like bigger than them. And so, like you say, we have to see how this works out, how they interact with her chiefs here, how in sync this operation in Wilmington, which is still in Wilmington, is with her core folks who are on the road and who are traveling with her. And can they stay very much in sync, which we know on kind of on a quick news cycle they have to do. And so there's a lot of challenges with getting this organization off the ground for a new candidate. And that's, again, what we're seeing right now. And they're hopeful that everybody knows the assignment. And, we just have to see.
It's working so far, but that's just something to continue to monitor. Man, I appreciate your reporting. You're doing great work over there. Everybody go follow Chris to keep up to speed on the day-to-day with the Kamala campaign. And, I guess any other future time that Donald Trump mixes up Black California politicians, he'd be a good person to go to on that. Chris, thank you so much for the time, brother.
Of course, anytime. Thank you.
All right, we'll be back tomorrow for another edition of the Bulwark Podcast. See y'all then. Peace.